Today we're going to start learning about factoring. Factoring is really, well, it's kind of almost like division. It's taking a polynomial that's in a standard form and it's putting it back to the two factors that you can multiply to get that polynomial. So we're going to start out with polynomials with 4 terms. And we're going to use our box method to put these 4 terms and get them factored out. So let's go ahead and just start with number 1. And what we've got are these 4 terms right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just put them in my 4 boxes. So I've got 8 s to the 3rd power. I've got s. I've got 64 s squared. And I've got 8. It doesn't really matter what order I put them into the boxes. I just kind of put them in as they came. And then what we're going to do is use the skill that we learned last class about finding the greatest common factor. So we're going to find the greatest common factor of these 2 terms going straight up. We'll find the greatest common factor of these 2 terms going straight up. Then we'll find the greatest common factor of these 2 terms going to the side and these 2 terms going to the side. So all we're doing is finding the greatest common factor 4 times and we're done. So starting right over here, we've got an s and we've got an 8. So there's no number I can take out of both except for the number 1. And there's no letter I can take out of both. So the best I can do on that, my greatest common factor, is a 1. Okay, let's do it again. For this column right here, as far as numbers go, I have an 8 and a 64. So the biggest number I can take out of both of these will be an 8. And then if I look at my variables, I have s to the 3rd, so 3 s's, and s to the 2nd, 2 s's. So the most number of s's that I could take out evenly of both of these would be s to the 2nd power. Okay, so let's do our greatest common factor again. We're good at this. Okay, so now I'm looking at these 2 terms right here. Looking at these 2 terms right here, I have an 8s cubed and I have an s. So I know I can't take any numbers out, but I can take out one s. So I'm going to take him out. And then looking at the very last group, I've got a 64 and an 8. So I already know I can take an 8 out of that. I don't have any variables over here, so 8 is the best I can take out of this thing. Okay, so my factors are 8s squared plus 1 and s plus 8. So really this is just using the boxes that we're familiar with and our skill of greatest common factors. Okay, so let's do number 2 together. Again, I'm just going to put my 4 terms into the boxes. So I got 21h cubed, 18h squared, negative 35h, and negative 30. And I'm going to start looking at my greatest common factors. So right here, if I look first at the numbers, I've got an 18 and I've got a 30, negative 30. Okay, so to take out my 18, or to take out from the 18 and the negative 30, I know 18 won't go into both. So I have to look smaller. And it looks like a 6 will be the greatest common factor I can take out of both. I don't have a variable in both, so 6 is it. Now let's look over at the next column. And As far as my numbers go, it looks like I can take a 7 out of both of these things. And I've got 1H on bottom, 3 on top, so 1H is it. Okay, so now let's go side to side. Let's do this top row. I've got 3H squared, looks to be the greatest things I have in common in that row. And in the bottom row, looks like we can do a 5. And that's about as good as we can do. We don't have a letter. The one thing, though, to point out, notice that my leading one, the one that is closest to pulling out, if that is a negative, then I need to pull out a negative. Now here, I had a positive and a negative, but the number closest to the wall that I was pulling out was positive, so I pulled out a positive. So here, the closest to the wall that I'm pulling out is a negative, so I'm going to pull out a negative 5. Okay, so my factors are 7H plus 6 and 3H squared minus 5. Okay, so pause the video and go ahead and do number 3 on your own, and then check back and make sure you got it right. Okay, so the answer is 6A plus 1 times 2A squared minus 5. All right, so that's if we're dealing with 4 terms, we put them in the boxes. Now let's talk about factoring a typical quadratic. It'll be a 3-term, sometimes a 2-term. The biggest thing you really need to know, well, there's a lot of things you need to know. But the first thing we need to know is when we've got something in standard form, that's this form right here, we're actually talking about ax squared plus bx plus c. So the first skill I want you to practice is just picking out the a, the b, and the c. So looking at number 4, ax squared, our a is going to be the number 1. Plus bx, our b is going to be 6. And plus c is going to be an 8. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and make sure you can identify the a, the b, and the c for number 5 and number 6. And really the point of finding the a, the b, and the c is so that we could set up our X puzzle, the things that you got really good at doing over the last week. Our X puzzle, when you're looking at the X of the puzzle, all that really is your A times C on the top and your B on the bottom. So as soon as you can quickly identify your A, B, and C, you can quickly set up your X puzzle. And we will be using this X puzzle from now on for doing all of our factoring. So if we look at number 7, what we've got is x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now remember the pattern. If you can remember the pattern that we got to in our boxes, then we can go ahead and figure out where to put our first and last term in the box. So our first term always goes here, and our last term always goes here. So all we've really got to do is figure out how to get the 8x into the boxes. And they obviously make up our peanut pair. So to do that, we're going to use our X puzzle. So if we look at our equation, our A equals 1, our B equals 8, and our C equals 15. So I've just identified my A, B, and C. And then if you go back and look at the X puzzle, the very top is A times C. So 1 times 15 is 15, and the bottom is 8. So now all we have to do is a skill we already know, which is fill out our X puzzle. And from looking at this, I know that 5 times 3 will equal 15, and 5 plus 3 will equal 8. So these two things that we're figuring out, the 5 and the 3, they make up our peanut pair. So all we have to do doesn't matter which box we put it in, but we have to put in our peanut pair using the 5 and the 3. So notice I put it 5x and 3x because our peanut pair is always the x term. So I just took my 5, put it in one of the boxes with x, and my 3, put it in one of the boxes with x. It didn't matter which box I put it in, I just put it in one. And now, going back to the skill we just learned, to get our factors out of the box, we're just going to take our greatest common factor of each column and of each row, and we'll be done. So let's start out with this first column. My greatest common factor is going to be a 5 for the numbers. There's not a letter in both, so 5 is it. And in my other column, I don't have a number that's in common, but I do have an x. Now we're going to take that top row. I don't have a number in common, but I do have an x again, so I'll write another x. And with my bottom row, this time I don't have an x in common, but I do have a 3 that's in common with both. So I'm ready to write my answer. My answer is x plus 5 and x plus 3. And that's all there is to it for going backwards. Okay, let's work on number 8 together. First thing we need to do is identify our A, our B, and our C. So A equals 1, B equals 13, and C equals 12. Okay, so A times C, that's what goes up here, is 12, and my B goes down in the bottom. Let's go ahead and fill out our puzzle, what we already know. Our first term goes in the first box, our last term goes in the last box. And now we're going to look at the X puzzle to figure out our peanut pair. And I know that 12 times 1 is going to equal 12 and add up to 13. So I can go ahead and fill in my peanut pair, 12x and 1x. Now all I have to do is take out the greatest common factors and write my answer. So starting with the first column, does it matter where I start? No, I just, creature of habit, start in the same place most times. Okay, I have a number in common, but I don't have a letter, so I can take out the 12. And in the other column, I have an x I can take out. I can also take out a 1, but the 1 really doesn't matter, so I'm not going to bother to write that. And then in my very top row, I have an x I can take out. And in my bottom row, looks like I have just a 1 that I can take out. Can't take out anything else. So my answer is x plus 12 and x plus 1. If I'm ever concerned, do I have the right answer? Very simple to multiply these two through the boxes and check. Or I could even just check and look. I got x times x is x squared. I got x times 12 is 12x. X times 1 is x, and 1 times 12 is 12. Okay, so now let's turn the page. Number 9 and 9 again are really just more of the same things. So go ahead and pause your video, do them on your own, and then check back. The biggest thing to notice on the second number 9 is your A times C is going to be important in your X puzzle. Okay, check your answers on the top two. Make sure that you got them done the same way. Doesn't matter the order that you put your two factors in at the end, as long as you have the correct numbers inside each parentheses. Okay, so our next section, 10 through 12, there's one more step we have to do. On 10 through 12, before we can put them through the box and come up with the factoring that way, before we can do that, we have to check and see every time if there's a greatest common factor we can pull out of all three terms. So obviously in 10 through 12, there's going to be a greatest common factor we can pull out of all three terms. So always check that first, pull out that greatest common factor, and then what's remaining on the inside of your parentheses, you'll put through the boxes. So let's do number 10 together. So on number 10, the first thing we need to do is figure out what the greatest common factor is of all three of these. So I've got a 2, a 14, and a 36. So I can already see, and I don't have a C, a letter, in all three of them. So 2 is the thing that I can take out of all three of these. So I'm going to divide each one of these guys by 2, and that leaves me C squared, because my 2's cancel out. Negative 14 divided by 2 is going to be minus 7C, and negative 36 divided by 2 is going to be minus 18. Now that's what I'll be putting through my boxes. So go ahead and start. My first term there, my last term here. My A is 1, my B is negative 7, and my C is negative 18. So let's go ahead and put those into the X puzzle. So A times C is negative 18, and B is negative 7. So looking at negative 18, how about negative 9 times 2? That'll give me a bigger number as a negative. And check those out. Those work. So those are going to be negative 9x and positive 2x, my peanut pair. Now I can start taking out my greatest common factor. Since I have a negative closest to the wall I'm pulling out, I'm going to pull out a negative 9. And it looks like somewhere in the middle I changed from C's to X's, so I'm going to just make that an X for ease of changing this. Okay, so on that one I can take out an X. Then going across, top row, I can take out an X. And across bottom row, I can take out a 2. So now let's go down lower and write our whole answer. We initially factored out a 2, and then our terms are x minus 9 and x plus 2. And that's our answer. Okay, so go ahead and do number 11 and number 12 on your own, remembering you'll have to take out a greatest common factor before you begin the box method, and then turn the video back on to check your answers. Okay, double check your answers on 10, 11, and 12, and make sure that you got all the same answers. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to come into tutoring.